Yeah, it's different to the woman's experience of birth and pregnancy.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm often quite cautious not to overstep I say, this is what I've read, this is what the research says, obviously. Anyway, I am here with Samantha Crawford. Sam has an extremely impressive international career as an operatic soprano. She's performed roles at wonderful opera houses all around the world, including the Teatro Real, the Aldeburgh Festival, the Edinburgh Festival. She sung here in the UK at the major summer festivals, Garsington, Glyndebourne. She sung at the Scottish Opera. There's plenty more there, but we'll be here all day if I list all the places she's performed. Lots of a long list of honors and awards. She was awarded the Golden Medal with honors at the 2017 Berliner International Music Competition, and the Wagner Society Award. I didn't realize you were already moving into this, big adult rep. Is that where you see your voice going?
I am happy to sing as broad a repertoire as possible. I think probably German romantic music is something that my voice is suited to. I don't want to particularly say just Wagner. Certainly, there are so many other composers I love singing. I did a big diet of Mozart growing up through the college years, and really the first 5 years at least out of college, and only really even put my toe in the water with that sort of broader repertoire and that heavily orchestrated stuff because a coach recommended the competition to me, and I thought, I don't really have anything I can put myself forward for that. I don't know the right arias. I'm not sure what I would sing. So it was really because someone took me in hand and showed me the lighter lyric roles, the Elsas, the Evas, Elizabeth, these kind of things. And it was step by step. So happy to be singing the right thing there, but very much, love Verdi, love Mozart, love Puccini, love a broad brushstroke.
Do you feel it? I feel at college there's this Verdi and Wagner has this like yeah. Thou shalt not touch,
yeah.
kind of
touche pas.
Yeah, and I remember I was speaking to the wonderful I think he calls himself bass baritone now. I'm sorry if that's wrong. The wonderful Ian Patterson, Scottish, possibly the next great Wotan of the world. Probably, maybe you could say that already. I'm not sure, but but also a pretty cool, relaxed guy. And he just said, look, you find out if you can sing Wagner by singing Wagner. It's one doesn't need to be sort of terrified of it. Just
I think it's a good way in. I mean, I started by singing a Flower Maiden in Parsifal, and I feel like basically any soprano or mezzo, I think, of any weight voice could sing that, and it's all down to the same old things like size of opera house, size of orchestra, all these things taken into consideration. Is it an open air theatre, or is it like a smaller German house? All these kind of things worth thinking about, and especially maybe if it's a festival opera, they have, of course, the long picnic intervals. So if you wanted to try a role and maybe pace yourself, you're always giving yourself that window of a bit of extra breathing space to recoup.
That, what, the long eating window was often my downfall when I was
really
saying roles at Glyndebourne. Yeah, I kind of forgot occasionally that you had to re-warm up. It's long enough, it's just long enough that you cool down, and it's a strange experience. Rarely does, I guess you do at college, but I think not since college had I sort of done an hour and a half of singing and then rested for like an hour and a half and then done another 2 hours of singing. That's very much the college.
Because you don't even get that when, you never get that when you're rehearsing, really, except for the final stage in orchestras. But even when you're rehearsing the production that will ultimately have that longer interval, that's not what you use your studio time for. It's still the hour break at lunch, isn't it? It's still shorter. So you're not.
And an hour, I find it in an hour, you don't quite cool down properly. You're still kind of revving at the end of lunch.
Yeah. And you don't sit for too long. You're not static for too long, where everything just sort of tends to start to settle. As a woman, I have to say that often you don't get to settle quite as much because someone is always coming in to either put your wig back on, do your corset up again. There's something to kind of give you a bit more of that 20-minute lead up into the thing. The guys are like, yep, got my jacket, on I go.
Look, I won't argue, I won't die on this hill, but you're talking to someone who's had full body tattoos painted on them.
Yeah, totally. Of course, of
So
course. I'm only joking.
it's you know, I'd say you're probably right 99% of the time, but there's been a couple of times when I've been in that chair for a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, but of course, and what is going to be the focus of today, you are a mother of
Yes.
2 beautiful young children. Will you tell us about your family?
Of course, yeah. So I'm married to Matt, and we have 2 beautiful daughters, Andromeda, who is 2.5, and her little sister Aurora, who is 10 months.
Fantastic names.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The flair for the theatrical in those names.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And hey, I am embarrassed somewhat. I was reading your biog. Obviously, you know, Sam and I know each other from the Guildhall. We studied together. But I didn't realize you were a British Australian soprano.
Yes, that's right. So my dad was Aussie. So I'm a, dual passport holder, dual nationality, and amazingly, it means that both of our daughters will be eligible as well, which is fab. Because I'd hate for that to be lost. Obviously, the accent shows you that I grew up in the UK, but I've spent all my life going back and spending long chunks of time with nearly all the family live in Australia. So there's just my father that came over with his mother, and then the other grandparents, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, everyone is in Australia. And then there's
where are they?
mum's side. I'm spread about predominantly North Shores of Sydney, but there's extended family in Melbourne, up in Brizzy, but inland. They're like property owners, all Jackarooing, Dillarooing.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done my time there.
Nice.
And yeah, it's great. I love.
Have you worked out there? Have you been to Sydney, to Opera Australia, or Queensland?
No, I haven't yet. I had some links doing a bit of concert work out there through the Wagner Society of New South Wales, because they for a couple of years in a row awarded me a young artist scholarship. I think it's called the President's Prize. So that was great. And they also supported my performance that I was doing with Tate Trust with Stuart Skelton when we did a big Wagner concert where I got to sing Sieglinde alongside him, which was amazing, although slightly daunting to do that as my first outing of the role with he who has recorded it like 5 times over. So yeah, a brilliant experience, and really lovely to have that connection with all my Australian roots and Aussie family, but definitely love to get back out there, obviously with restrictions lifting.
It might be
as soon as possible for a mix of family time and of course, yeah, work as well.
He's not a bad singer, that Stuart Skelton.
He's not. He's also a really nice guy to boot.
Yeah. I saw him, I was in Brisbane singing Don Giovanni, and he was there singing Peter Grimes. And he performed and he was on the next flight out to London because he was singing, I'm going to say, Tristan at Covent Garden the next day. And he did it. I mean, this is superhuman. This is superhuman ability.
Yeah, he is incredible. He was singing the Siegmund in the production that I did just before COVID.
Oh yeah.
My last production before lockdown, and he was singing Siegmund and I was singing one of the Valkyries, and he was there. It was 2 casts, and he was very incredibly generous and sung for an awful lot of the rehearsals when the other Siegmund hadn't arrived yet, and he gave his his time and his artistry to the other cast to help them, and for the other characters to work off in the rehearsal room, which is incredibly generous. Really, really lovely, warm man, and fantastic singer to boot. So yeah.
So let's talk about being a parent and a singer.
Yeah.
So can I ask how your Andromeda is 2.5, you said?
She is, yeah.
So how soon after you gave birth to your first child did you start singing again?
So my first gig was booked for 8 weeks after the birth. I did sit down with some friends because I had something around 2 weeks afterwards, and I had a chat actually with some of the founders of Swapra, Kitty Waitley, Anna Patalong, and Maddie Pirard, and Rachel Willis Sorensen. They all gave me some time and some TLC and some words of some words of advice. And they said, like, if you don't have to take the gig for 2 weeks after the birth, you know, you don't need to put that pressure on yourself. So I returned 8 weeks afterwards, which meant I set myself a goal of starting to have coachings and preparing that piece, singing it through again at 6 weeks after birth. And they all shared their different stories with me. A lot of them went back to work as quick as that, if not quicker. And it was absolutely fine for me. I mean, part of it is definitely just that delirium, sleep deprivation / euphoria that is that first at least 2 months of immediately after your baby's born. So I feel like it went fine. I'm proud of how I did. I don't have a recording of the performance. I'm sure it was absolutely fine, but it was a slightly out of body experience, but I felt well prepared.
What were you singing?
I was singing Hymnus Paradisi by Howells with at Chelmsford Cathedral, and it's a beautiful lyric piece for orchestra, choir, and soprano. And tenor. And yeah, so not too stressful. And some of the advice I got from other singers was, whatever you can learn before your due date, take that time, because it'll sink into that other part of your brain that you can kind of access more readily after the birth. Whereas if you just start learning it in the run up, like, you're just making it so much harder for yourself. But whatever repertoire you can get learned in advance, pack it on in there, and then you can revisit it, and you will have sung it in. I know the muscle memory will be slightly different because when of the weight of the baby sitting in your pelvis, but it will have helped because you'll have strengthened and carried on using those core muscles. I performed right up until 4 weeks before the birth, actually at the Soprano Gala at Opera Holland Park, which was a brilliant thing to kind of go out on for the first. Yeah, it was an amazing night.
What was that?
And then I just sung at home. But 1 week before the birth, I was like, let's just cool it for a bit. I mean,
so you gave yourself a week, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like most singers. I'm, kind of a hustler, kind of wanted to carry on. I did feel good. I mean, it is totally each body, each pregnancy, each baby. Even my own experiences were different baby to baby, never mind anybody else's. What I would say is I had a healthy pregnancy. There were no complications. I felt good. I managed to stay fit, apart from that summer in 2018 being insanely hot that made everything quite uncomfortable. I
remember.
I had it within me to keep singing, so I thought I'm going to, because if all the parts that you don't know about afterwards, like will my birth be uncomplicated, will the baby be okay, I just thought that which I can take into reasonable control, I'm going to put the effort into. So I just carried on singing because it was okay, and I had enough room to sort of breathe. And then
No, please finish.
And so then afterwards, it felt like the recovery wasn't, for me, I didn't feel like it was quite such an Everest to climb. I was like, okay, well, I've made myself a base camp, and I'm going to go back to that as a reference point. And it was the right decision for me.
One thing you've, I was going to ask it directly later, but since you've sort of alluded to it a few times, is this idea of the pressure, one might hear of, Danny Denise at Glyndebourne singing a role. I think it was, a major role. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks after she gave birth and things like that. What advice might you give to a singer, obviously particularly a woman, who is experiencing that pressure? Because as you've already said, not every pregnancy is the same, and even intra-individual, each pregnancy can be quite different. So it stands to reason that, if you're only able to come back 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever, after your pregnancy, or even psychologically, you just don't want to, the acceptance of that as a completely rational and reasonable decision.
What would my advice be to singers about that?
Yeah, because I still feel, and I think it's probably getting better, and you would have a better idea than me, but I still feel there's a competitive pressure. How late into your pregnancy can you go? How soon after you give birth can you come back? Am I wrong to sort of feel like I've noticed that?
No, I don't think you're wide of the mark. I've felt some of that. being completely honest. And when I spoke with other women raising that concern, you know, because I also went to other singers for advice, thinking I'm walking a path and I want advice from those that have gone before me. They most people do feel that to a greater and lesser extent. I think probably a lot of it depends on your support network. How well do you feel supported around your whole career in general, one thing, but then in how well do you feel supported going into motherhood and carrying forward your career whilst juggling that? Because as you know, I mean, quite a lot of people in our industry work, they often meet in two separate countries, often when they've been studying somewhere or later on a gig, and then you're married and you're from two different places and your place of residence might be a third country. So then that family support that a lot of people do rely on, perhaps, you know, extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, isn't there. So you definitely need to be sort of realistic about it. And some of the best advice I could give to make sure you feel supported is get the right childcare for you. If you feel like your child is being well taken care of, you will be able to release some of that mental strain and focus on work and not just figuratively beat yourself over the head about you know, being both an inadequate performer and an inadequate parent. That's certainly my experience. I was just thinking, like, there is sort of a pressure to feel like you're bossing it all.
Great advice.
But some of that must be, I think, a little, for me, some of that is self-imposed. But I think my observation of just being mates with loads of singers is we're all quite hard on ourselves. We're all quite can be driven by perfection, and there is a pressure when you're freelance, of course. Financially, you do need to consider which contracts you can afford to take and not take, and obviously, if you don't have a great pregnancy, you might have had to withdraw from something because that was the doctor's advice, or you might have to consider that on the other side. But I'd say it's much better to be as well informed as you can be and not be fatalistic. I think the main thing I've learned about, probably the best thing I've learned about being a parent, is that your body is incredible, women. Your body is incredible. It was designed to be able to grow life, give birth to it, and sustain it afterwards. And also, you're already a trained singer, so your body has had this like years and years of discipline on this other side, and you can trust yourself, you can trust your body. I think I was just so amazed at the deepening level of trust I had. It was incredible to realize what my body could do, both in terms of being pregnant and being a parent, but then also after I'd given birth, how I could return to work on less sleep than I ever thought possible, less preparation time, feeling more unclear in my head. But actually, once I walked into the rehearsal room, because I'd got some childcare in place, whether Matt, family member, friend, neighbor helping, nanny, you know, a mix of all of that. It's never totally straightforward. I just kind of released my brain to sort of disengage with that. I thought, if I can't trust it to be going on well, then I can't be present in the rehearsal room. And I've worked so hard for my job and I love my job so much. I want to turn up and absolutely give of my best. So that's some of my advice for.
That's fantastic advice. I am not back singing yet. That has been almost exactly a year since I've done.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm quite busy with work, just not singing, and I was kicking myself for, you know, I guess since the start of this year, for not being able to look after a baby and also continue on this new business venture that I've been doing. And so my wife has now gone back to work, and we're just doing 2 days a week of nursery, and it's so beautiful to just have those two. I basically work 3 epic long days a week, and the other, you know, I work Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Friday I look after Evelyn, and Claire works, and but to have those, knowing I have those days when she's being cared for, the nursery we have is phenomenal, and to be able to just say she's off having a wonderful time, learning, developing, having experience.
Peace of mind for you.
Yeah, and I can just like do everything, you know, what I would normally do in 6 days in 3, just ultra focused. I think that's fantastic advice. So actually, something I hadn't really.
So can I jump in and ask you a question, Duncan?
Yeah, please.
Do you have dad guilt in the way that lots of mums I know talk about mum guilt? Is it the same on the other foot? Because I've talked about Matt with it sometimes, and he is very much, when the child is being, our lovely daughter is being taken care of, he is so free and like, yep, and he just absolutely, like you, kind of goes straight into his work mode. He's self-employed as well. And yeah, it's interesting, slightly different dynamic between genders, but for you?
So can you define mum guilt? Do you mean guilt that someone else is looking after your child?
No, well, mum guilt's just like kind of trying to balance all the responsibilities and feeling like maybe you're not quite spinning every plate in the way that you should be, because there's sometimes a perceived societal pressures of, you should be there doing the lovely cake bake sales, you should be looking absolutely fabulous, you should be out, have loads of energy in the evenings to go out for cocktails with friends when allowed. You also should have perfectly like non-snotty children that don't spread, coughs and colds to everybody else. And also boss your career and make it look absolutely amazing. Like mum guilt comes out of an unrealistic sort of
post it all on Instagram.
Kind of, yeah, and like hashtag living my best life, all that. I'm probably not summarizing it perfectly, but I wonder if you feel a similar pressure to, I don't know.
I certainly go through periods of feeling tremendous personal inadequacy, but that was there before my daughter was born.
Sure, I mean.
But no, if I'm honest, I mean, every time I drop her, I walk her to nursery, and whoever comes to greet her, Evie, her face just lights up. She loves them all. I mean, they are wonderful, and it's very user friendly. There's an app, and they constantly send you photos, and she's always smiling and playing with toys and interacting with the kids. And so no, I mean, perhaps I would if I wasn't so convinced that she was.
Yeah, that kind of circles back to what I was saying though, because adequate decent childcare means you get the freedom. I think it just really comes down to that. That's my lived experience, is when it was bad or things were a bit when we weren't sure which days it was happening, it was just so stressful because you always have your work deadlines creeping up for everything, and it's just about managing expectations. When I knew I had my days, I felt so much more relaxed. I was like, I can deal with a crazy 3-day window if that's what it's going to be, and then I'll have 2 days to really push forward in the things. So I agree, it's similar.
I think you articulate it beautifully, and it was only when you were saying it that I went, oh yeah, she's totally right. So actually, one thing that also popped into my mind when you were just speaking, do you think it's possible that we overblow the inability, the ability of mothers to come back? Because actually, when you were explaining your experience, I was sort of running over in my mind other experiences I've had working with new mothers or women who are pregnant, and to be honest, it's a decade of feeling amazed at how phenomenal they were, and I wonder if it is not to take away from how phenomenal they were, but perhaps my perception was incorrect. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'll just speak from my own experience. Actually, well, I have worked with a lot of other parents at a similar stage to me with really little ones, and what I would say is, for every particularly woman stepping back into the rehearsal room, delivering at the exact same level that everyone would expect, where the professional bar is, of behind the scenes, it's the duck or the swan analogy. There is just so much pedaling going on underwater, and that's not to say that it isn't possible, because clearly we're in the room delivering the job and everybody's happy. I mean, like, the employers are happy. But you mustn't I don't think you should underestimate what is happening to facilitate that sort of that singer turning up in the room. It's either a great support net behind them, it's a spouse that's really understanding and helpful that often travels with them, or a paid nanny. It's someone that's worked very hard at doing sleep routines, or a mum that's spending her breaks expressing in a, okay, some theatres are getting a lot better at this now, but sometimes the toilets or in very unpleasant, not great environment, and saving that milk and perhaps arranging for someone to pick it up to take it back to the baby, and just so many extra plates being spun.
Yeah, sure.
I would say, yes, they deserve your respect, but also we as singers love it. I think a lot of people are choosing to step back into the room. I know everyone has financial considerations as well. But I think I personally found it a thrill to go back to work. I know that some people who felt they had to return to work very quickly afterwards when there had been more complications going on, said it was just about sort of making it work. It wasn't enjoyable for them, but they delivered, they did their job. They kind of took a bit of time after that contract had finished to heal or kind of regroup or work out how to take the pressure off a little bit. But that contract was important for them, or that role was important for them. And we don't have a perfect timeline of how our careers pan out, so sometimes there's a bit of extra squeeze. They're all still singing phenomenally and have gone on to continue to book work, and they did find a way of making it work, but it was all again down to sort of what was going on behind the scenes, and having that love of your job and those disciplines, just finding that motivation to get up and do your exercises and see those coaches even when you are more sleep deprived, or it is quite complicated, the childcare for that day, or you would love to stay for a tiny bit of socializing afterwards for a coffee after everybody's finished the first week of rehearsals, but unfortunately you have to rush back.
Or you just want to see the baby. Yeah, of course.
So that's my observation / my own experience of getting back into the rehearsal room, is you can do it and it feels amazing when it's going well, but there's a lot of swan.
Sounds like the planning is key.
Yeah.
Your experience.
I think something that really helped, I don't know if you found this also, but I mean, singers, we're quite good at improvising, not just on the stage, but like on the road. I mean, if you don't have quite the right, we have to pack for a long time abroad, and we have to work out how to take some perhaps workout gear, some opening night clothes, we know how to sort of pack and fit things in and just improvise a bit. I mean, I made up loads of toys from like plastic bottles and just stuff on the road, because you've just got to make it work, and it is possible, and it's in the planning. I did some research when I was working abroad a couple of times, and there are companies that will let you hire baby equipment just for this very short amount of time that you're doing the contract, and they will drop it off and take it back for you. Which obviously is a huge win, because who's going to travel with a high chair and the push chair and the car seat? No. Preparation, those kind of things, a little bit of research, or joining forums. I know that you've joined in some of the chats that the Swapra charity host, which are really supportive, and they're a great resource for any parents feeling a bit overwhelmed or at the start of this process. I highly recommend you get in touch with them, because they have so many resources and they're really good at pointing people, like either connecting them with someone that perhaps is in that country or to an online resource. So yeah, definitely check out the work of Swapra.
I think that's great advice. I the reason I was keen to sort of listen in to some of the Swapra stuff was I before I became a father, I was the beneficiary of some of the work they did. With Scottish Opera, I was doing the show for the Edinburgh Festival, but it was sort of through Scottish Opera, and this very simple change of shifting Monday rehearsals later in the day. So instead of doing morning, afternoon on Mondays, you do afternoon, evening.
Yeah.
And it means you can go home for the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some absolutely fantastic.
God, it's such an easy shift, but it makes the world of difference, even to a non-parent, even to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to widen it out just from parents, I mean, there are so many people with extenuating life, circumstances, whether they parents or perhaps grown-up children who are caring for parents. There's just so many more scenarios where that kind of flexibility is a massive blessing. And I know that Scottish Opera have done things, and I know James Cotton at Holland Park has been really good at working with Swapra, and I think I'm right in saying he, for one of the seasons scheduled every opera like all in advance, so everybody knew right from the start date to the final show exactly which rehearsals were going to take place on which days, which is amazing and does prove it's possible. But yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic step forward and something that's really, really helpful in that direction. There's been a series of roundtable talks by Opera UK, which is a new organisation that's just come up during the time of lockdown, and a lot of the conversations were around things that can change in the industry to facilitate more inclusiveness.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Brilliant. So we've touched on support networks. In my nutritional work, seem to have garnered a bit of a reputation for being a myth buster, not intentional, but one surprise of working in this field now for the best part of 18 months, 2 years, is as much as giving information to people, I spend at least half my time inoculating people against the misinformation that they are inevitably going to come across. And sometimes people love it, like when I tell them, caffeine isn't necessarily bad for your voice, or that dairy is going to cause excessive mucus. And sometimes people don't like it. It depends on whether it's pleasing information. Unfortunately, I resolved myself to always just follow the research, whether it's pleasing to me or not. You mentioned when we were chatting earlier a couple of the, I guess, myths that you came across that surprised you. Can we talk about a couple of those?
Yeah, sure. They're particularly related to performing during pregnancy, or maybe also immediately afterwards if you're still breastfeeding. Yes, myth busting about, do you ever eat for two? It seems so exciting, but sadly, no. I know you've also researched that and know from supporting your wife through her pregnancy, but yeah, the advice from the midwives and what the doctors say is that depending on your weight and height, it's really only 200 to 300 extra calories per day in your third trimester. So sadly, really only like 2 pieces of bread or a banana.
It's about half a sandwich from Fred. Yeah,
it's not that Ben and Jerry's that you were gunning for. Yeah, so there never comes a point when you're eating for two, sadly.
It's obviously not as important, but a similar myth exists in the world of like bodybuilding or
sure.
Strength sports athletes who want to put on muscle. This idea that you need to eat in this incredible calorie surplus to put on muscle mass, just a complete myth. Anything above about 150 or 200 daily calories surplus will simply be turned into visceral, into body fat.
Right.
The extra calories you need to support putting on lean tissue is minimal. It's almost so negligible that you may as well not account for it. Just eat a healthy diet.
Interesting. And feeding into that, I was reading some more research about performers, because our job is more physically demanding. So perhaps people are wondering, like, yeah, but do I need to eat more because of, rehearsal room work is tiring, etc. But and should you therefore eat things like protein bars or take protein powders and things, because perhaps protein is a better thing to be having more of pregnant? But it's not really true. It's all about trying to eat as many whole foods as possible, or as close to them still remaining whole. And a processed food is defined as anything that's got more than 5 ingredients in. So sadly,
I've never heard that definition.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, I checked on the chocolate I was eating, and it actually wasn't more than 5. So there's a loophole right there.
Okay.
No, chocolate moderation. Yeah, just that was another one. And they were saying that the protein particularly the protein that's in protein bars is not the right kind of protein. It should be dietary protein, particularly for pregnancy, and that it just isn't absorbed in the right way. So I thought, I didn't actually ever eat protein bars, but when I was feeling quite nauseous, like lots of women, I was trying to stem that feeling by snacking lightly, because that's one of the few ways, even though you feel bad, it actually feels better once you've had something, weirdly. So I was having, dry crackers, a small handful of nuts, some dried fruit, some fresh fruit, sort of same old, and occasionally, granola bars, or like the ones that are packed full of nuts, and trying not to have it too processed, and not actually picking up a protein bar, but instead picking up a bar that's basically oats, nuts, and fruit is a better option, even though you might think, yeah, but this looks more kind of like it's going to tick more nutrition boxes. It's not true.
When I'm asked to summarize my best dietary advice in a sentence, which is a hard question to answer, but I get asked it in every lecture, seminar, conversation I give. I steal from the American food writer Michael Pollan, who says, eat whole foods, mostly plants, not too much. And actually, this is, in my opinion, this is some of the most succinct, best advice on any topic I've ever heard. If you do those three things, in the great majority of cases, in the absence of medical conditions, you're 95% of the way there. And you've just really touched on that first element of eating whole foods. It's very interesting for me to have so many questions. I hear so many women talk about protein supplements, and it's very interesting, because in a Western diet, a protein deficiency is basically never seen in conditions of caloric adequacy. So yes, you can be protein deficient, but it's normally because a person isn't eating enough total calories. As long as you're eating enough food,
it's within it, yeah.
The chances of being protein deficient are extremely minimal. And I genuinely believe the interest in the need for protein is actually entirely based on marketing. People who want to sell you.
I would agree. As an outsider who's not a nutritionist, but as a woman who's lived through the 90s and noughties, I would say that I feel strongly that it's a dietary push that came sort of really from like that Atkins and these kind of diets that were very like carbs are the enemy and it's all about the protein, which is, I think it's been proven that it's fairly unsustainable. Each body to their own, and definitely don't, pick a diet without seeking adequate medical advice. But for me, in pregnancy particularly, I had to sort of remind myself to eat more carbohydrate because especially after I'd given birth, I sort of carried on with my regular diet, and I hadn't really worked out, which you would have thought was common sense, that breastfeeding is really hungry work. I didn't realize that because someone is taking calories, the literal milk, out of my body, that I needed to put more back in. I know that sounds really common sense, but I just didn't think about it. I thought, oh, well, you're not inside me anymore. I'm not growing you in the same way. I was sort of getting back to rehearsing. I started the right kind of exercise, gentle yoga to start with, then swimming. And then I realized that I certainly didn't have any extra weight, but then I noticed it was coming off, and I absolutely wasn't intending for it to. And it just kept coming off. And I thought, well, I keep eating. I'm really hungry for every meal. And I was eating much more sort of substantial meals than I would have thought of before. And I was hungry for every single one. And I didn't want sweet snacks. And I was too busy anyway, I wasn't sitting around having biscuits. I was like, I want fish and chips. And then I want something. I know it's terrible for a dietary thing, but it was all balanced. But the point is, you do need to understand as a woman that it's costing your body more. And at breakfast, if I had an egg with bread, I really should have done something simple like just cooked another egg, but I needed someone to sort of just take me in hand. And it was actually my singing teacher and good friend, Yvonne Kenny, who sat me down and was like, I think you need to just like readdress what's going on with your diet, because some weight's coming off and it's not trying to. And I was getting more anxious and more exhausted, and I couldn't understand why. And honestly, it was partly I just needed to address taking time for my well-being to sit down for a little bit longer and eat a bit of a bigger meal, which I know sounds very simplistic, but you'd be amazed with, well, you probably wouldn't because you are a new parent. There is just so much to do every day with a new one that it is hard to sometimes find the time to eat, and you do realize that you've just completely gone. And
I never, in my life, I'd never forgotten to eat until I had a
Right, well,
believe me. I
yeah.
wanted my food, and then
People, and another of my friends was like,
yeah, I haven't eaten yet. Yeah,
I know. Me too. I absolutely love all my meals and look forward to them. So it was bizarre that it could get so many hours into the day, and I'm like, I still haven't eaten anything proper. You know, I've managed to make a coffee. Whoop-de-doo, that's not enough.
the reality in the scenario you've talked about of caloric needs in pregnancy and caloric needs in breastfeeding. In my limited experience, I have had, obviously, I have my wife, but I have had a few clients, pregnant clients, and then postnatal clients and nutrition clients. And my experience is that culturally, we have it backwards. People think you need all this extra energy for the pregnancy, and then they, as you experienced, almost forget about it in the breastfeeding. But actually, the caloric needs, I'm sorry if I get these numbers slightly wrong because it's been a while since I've read it, but my understanding is it's about 500-600 daily calories extra you need for breastfeeding, depending on baby size, how much they're drinking, and so forth.
Sure.
But it's certainly more, but close to double the
yeah, considerable. And another thing about the Western way that we view pregnancy, birth, etc., which includes the question about you saying returning to work, is that, do you know that the let me get this right, the 12 weeks after birth are called the fourth trimester, that we have the 1, 2, 3, and then there's the fourth, which is actually, they said, I think the research is that, you know, physiologically, you know, baby's head has to come out after 9 months because that's the way the body's designed. But actually, in terms of the little babe that is born, it can't obviously do anything for itself at that stage. And you have this whole fourth trimester of where you're breastfeeding and growing, and the woman is healing and kind of knitting back together, and everything is kind of coming back. Hormone levels are changing again. Blood, the amount of blood in, like when you're pregnant, you produce I think 50% more blood in your whole body. So, you know, you really need to, there's just a lot of change happening afterwards and things adjusting. So that time is time to nurture yourself, to not overblow your environment. I think probably with our first child, we had too many visitors. We are very extroverted, so we were like, everybody come over. And of course, with Aurora being born, it was in lockdown, so we're like, nobody can come over. But
perhaps as well as being disappointing, at least somewhat of a blessing.
It taught me what it would have been like to have respected that, what my body needed more. I was so excited and busy and euphoric and everything that you are as a new parent. The first time round, I probably couldn't have even heard it, even if my body was saying, maybe you should have an extra half an hour's rest. I was just excited. And then if another person was coming, you know, for coffee and to meet Andromeda, I kind of went for it, and I got back out there auditioning, and I don't really regret any of that. It's just I'd learned experience. Like, it is what it was. I learned some things and I adjusted for our second child, and obviously this current situation we're all living in changed it anyway, but it did teach me. And I purposely booked the time I thought I would return to work after Aurora was born was going to be to sing Elizabeth in Tannhäuser, which is it's the most demanding role I would have done to date. And I gave myself double the amount of time. I gave myself 16 weeks rather than 8, because I thought that was my experience was I should give myself longer to really sing this in and get that requisite strength after the fourth trimester had finished. You asked about another myth busting thing.
Please.
Or well, maybe not busting it, but a little truth nugget, shall we say. So loads of women have low iron in pregnancy. I myself was one of those, and made me feel lightheaded and faint and, you know, extra tired at the end of the day and things. Pretty common, and your midwife will flag it up in your blood tests that you have during pregnancy, and you'll be given NHS prescription, like NHS level iron pills, which are not to be confused with the shop ones. I thought, oh, it's the same thing, and I didn't really check the labeling, but I was only having 15 milligrams and thought I had the right one. And I was saying to the midwife, I don't know why I've got low iron, because I'm taking an iron pill. And she said, let me see the packet. And she's like, the dose I want you on is 400 milligrams a day, and you're taking 15 because you have a shop brought one. So
not even
yeah, so please don't think, ladies, that it's the same. You need to check the dosage or get your midwife to check the dosage. And the other thing is, if you're trying to eat it in your diet as well, so I'd try and do eggs with spinach, and I'm vegetarian, so I wasn't eating steak, but please do, if you eat steak, chow down on steak and liver and all that stuff. That if you have caffeine at the same time that you're trying to absorb the iron, it will actually block the absorption in your blood, and you'd be much better off trying to have some vitamin C, because that helps absorption. So delay that coffee or have a little shot of orange juice, something.
It's great advice. And in practice, that interference effect with absorption can be hugely significant. Great advice. Great.
It felt loads better in the rehearsal room once I was taking the right dosage, because I just couldn't understand why it's confusing. I was eating the iron and then thought, oh, why is it not? And all I needed to do was adjust when I had the coffee. So.
Okay. Can I ask you a few, I don't know, maybe they're difficult questions, I'm not sure. Just some of them might seem out of left field, but
it's all right.
What's the number one thing that you learned that surprised you in, it doesn't have to be number one, but what's something that stands out as something that surprised you in the process of becoming a working performer, parent?
Sure. Probably what I alluded to earlier, that I was most surprised at how incredibly my body is designed, and therefore how much I could return to work and perform and still come up to par on so little sleep and on less preparation time. I found a whole new level of respect, and that was a surprise. I thought it was going to be more of an uphill struggle, but humans prevail, and resilient spirit, resilient body. So that's the biggest surprise.
That's great. Wow.
That's a good one.
Nice surprise, right? Yeah. Oh, it turns out I'm awesome. Wow.
Well, you said it, not me.
I mean, it sounds like it. No, I mean, really.
It was definitely just a wow moment of wow to womankind, wow to what bodies can do. Not so much wow me, just flipping heck, this is amazing. I'm grown a person, gave birth, and that was one of the most wow moments or surprises, but in a good way.
Mine is silly. Obviously I'm not back performing yet, but obviously I'm back working, but do you know what, it might sound pathetic, so whatever, such is life. I thought changing nappies was going to be this tremendous experience. You hear about, oh my gosh, you'll be up to your ears in nappies. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's actually quite a nice moment. Like Evie loves having the nappy changed, and she smiles and she kicks her leg.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I kind of wish. I just thought, oh my gosh, you have to change nappies all the time, and it's the worst. And it is really a nothing. It doesn't even factor in to my concern of the day or energy levels of the day. That was a really pleasant surprise. I think
that's great. I love that one.
Technology. Yeah. Anyway, hey, so what is the thing? Maybe it's one of the things we've talked about, but what is the thing that, in your opinion, most people or many people misunderstand about the whole experience of becoming a new parent and going back to performing work?
My answer feeds directly off of what you were just saying, really, about nappies, which is this might be a tad controversial, but it's definitely my experience. The most misunderstood thing I felt was that there was so much joy in being a parent. I felt like it was quite weighted towards this negative narrative of, it's going to be immensely hard, it's going to wreak havoc with your body, then it's going to be a huge uphill recovery. You'll never sleep again, there'll be endless nappies, this not that helpful narrative. And really, I just couldn't believe how much joy there was in it. Okay, that of course I had moments where I wanted more sleep and I didn't want to change another nappy, but overall felt like the branding was kind of off, and that made it a pleasure to want to return to work, because I thought, well, when I'm not being booked for work, it kind of took some of that pressure off. I was like, when I'm not at work, I have the real joy, really the real joy of being with my child and children, which I found so rewarding. And then if I'm not with them because I've been booked to do some work, how incredible is it that I get to go back and work in my industry and in my field in an area that I absolutely love, that I've already worked, as you know, our long training and the career progression that we go through. So that was for me. How about you?
I'm not sure yet, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah,
Sorry,
everyone needs hindsight.
yeah, I'm still, because I feel I'm still really in the thick of it. It's only 8 months, and and life hasn't been real. It's starting to get a bit more real now that Claire's back at work, but she's still back at work completely at home. Like, she works from this spot right here. And so
I think, and if you ask me in 5 years, I think a lot of, not the facts about pregnancy, but like a lot of the kind of reflective things, of course, hindsight will, but sure. I'm giving you my answer at this stage of the 2.5 and a 10-month-old. So
we'll come back in 5 years, all the wiser.
Yeah, we'll recap.
What advice would you give to your pre-parent self? Or I guess another way of asking that is there anything you would have done differently?
I think I would have.
Is there anything you did differently the second time round?
Yeah, what I talked about a little earlier, alluding to observing how it was the first time and basically creating a space that offered more well-being, a chance for more well-being. You can't control everything, like how the night goes or how well your baby is or how well you are, but I would have said, at my pre-parent self, I would have said, make sure you do as many things as possible to create like the most holistic place of well-being you can in your home or at work or wherever, which includes all the things we talked about. So good nutrition, some support for childcare, keeping your relationships in your relationships with your spouse well, all that kind of thing. Would have said that to myself, and just I would have said, be kind to yourself. You don't need to like boss it.
That's nice. That's good advice. I think that's good advice in general, right?
Yeah, be kinder to yourself. We're very, I think, from all I'm seeing, mates, we're quite punishing on ourselves. So I don't think you need to hammer down even more in the very early tender stages of tiny babies. You're created to be together at that time. I was actually had lunch with Kiri Takanawa because she was on a jury of a competition that I did when I was heavily pregnant with Andromeda in Hong Kong, of all places. And she gave me advice, said, you don't know how much time you'll want with your baby. I know you've got all these plans and you're telling me which contract you want to do. She said, but wait, also consider when the baby is born, how you feel, because you can't know that yet. And I thought that was really good advice. And it was good. I did sort of reassess a bit after Andromeda was born and not just plow ahead being in that kind of, well, I've said I'll do these gigs and I won't deviate from the path and I can't alter. Like, that is not necessary to be so punishing on yourself. You can change some things. So yeah, good advice.
My answer to that question would feed off that. I would tell myself, recognize how fulfilling it will feel.
Yeah.
A day, as every singer, there's not special in the slightest, but I've lost so much work, so much money, I've had contracts cancelled in 2023,
so sorry.
Crazy, and particularly for someone who'd given up a fair amount, I gave up a life in Australia and a career in law to come over here,
I remember all those days at Guildhall, you put the hours in.
Yeah, to sort of play catch up, and then a lot of time and sacrifice and effort, and then to have it sort of taken, it hurts, and even a bit of a loss of sense of identity.
Which I think all performing artists are grappling with, definitely.
This thing that has now become my, I guess, full-time job was always intended to be, I guess what you call it, a side gig, something I just really enjoy. I would do whenever I could find the time, but so I guess I'm lucky to have that. But a day spent with Evelyn is, for me, so much more fulfilling than a day spent with my clients. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to my clients, because I love this working with people. I love this in my job, but the hindsight, I would be so much less fearful of everything that happened this last 12 months had I known the reward.
Kind of coming back to that joy thing, you know, if someone had, I think it was a misconception for me, I definitely went into parenthood feeling more fearful and more, I guess, feeding back into that, got to prove that I'm going to get straight back out there ish kind of narrative, which if I'd have understood more the sheer joy of it, I don't think I would have, I'm sure I wouldn't have felt the same way I would have. If someone had said to me, it's never a day wasted, or even if someone had said it, would we have believed them, or would we have just been in our own, like, maybe you can only do it once you live it? It's hard to explain it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm really conscious of trying not to sound like a douchebag. Like, oh God, I just have so much perspective now that I'm a dad. I'm just as.
No, I definitely don't want to be in a self-congratulatory smug club. No members in the smug club. I just mean that it was such a lovely thing after, like you said, you work hard at college, not everything goes according to plan. There are lots of disappointments along the way. You do get your confidence knocked. There are plenty of things that make work both rewarding but extremely tough and demanding. And I thought that being a parent was just going to be another really demanding, overwhelming thing that meant work became even harder. And I didn't frame it in this is going to be totally rewarding when I have a day with either of the girls and I'm going to love it. And when they laugh, I won't even be thinking about, did I nail that top C? Like, it's just not even going to be on the, I think that's what I mean when I say that, not to be smug, but just to like relish how magical it felt.
My wife said the exact same thing. She's not a performer, but she has quite a excuse me, high pressure job in the corporate world, and she just said, you know what, there's little squabbles and little issues feel less significant, but in a good way. And gosh, I hope we don't look back on this and feel like we sound like douchebag, but I say that I only say that with the intention of soothing or encouraging, future working parents, not as anything else,
I would just know I'm not being smug about it at all. Matt and I have already been married 14 and a half years, and had our, like everyone, had our share of arguments. Honestly, with kids, just there isn't even the time to like make your point about the point to have the argument about not even the thing, but now the argument is just about the argument. That some of that you just can't even give space to.
I can't remember things anymore. I just had a fight. I can't remember.
Yeah, I just was like, we're a team and we just got to have each other's backs because it's too tough not to. We can't have that being in the mix as well as the pressure of being abroad. And during some of my contracts, we haven't been able to be together all the time. It's just not possible. It hasn't been for us possible to have the whole family unit together the whole time. Some performers do manage it with the families traveling with them, but we haven't. And of course that puts strain on things. So you just find a way to regroup quickly. And I think we just sort of made a faster version of just, you know what, that was 100% down to tiredness and burnout. Let's just draw a line and forward. Whereas before we would take the time because we probably had the energy to like micro-analyze some of it. Just now we're like, too tired, let's just go to sleep. If we have a glass of wine together, it'll all be fine.
It'll be good.
So that's encouragement. I say that not to be smug, purely to say, honestly, you can solve it with sleep and wine quite a lot of the time.
You know what? I think that's a beautiful note to end on. A glass of wine and a good sleep will fix all manner of problems.
It does.
Hey, Sam, thank you.
Pleasure, Duncan. Thank you.
Nice to chat to you. I think you've obviously really not just lived this, but considered it, and I think you'd be a sort of fabulous mentor for for any. You are involved in SWOPRA, are you?
Oh no, not officially. I
Okay.
attend their coffee mornings, which are great. You can just sign up through a form online. They're open to anyone, and so I'm connected to that community of performers. It's all sorts. It's carers. It's parents. Yeah, a whole mix. If you drop them a line or check out the website, there's loads of information there. But I have a big heart for mentoring and have really enjoyed. I've done quite a lot of informal mentoring with postgrad and undergrad students from Royal Academy, Royal College, Guildhall. Something I really care about, because for me, it was always really helpful to chat to someone about 5-ish years ahead of me. It was super important to have people like Yvonne, my teacher, and all those, and Kiri, who gave advice and are in that much more reflective period. Totally invaluable, but
you need someone two or three steps ahead. Like, it's all very well to have it's all very well. It's wonderful to have a masterclass with Brinta Fell or Jerry Finley, but they're not exactly 3 steps ahead. They're like 300 steps. You need.
Yeah, and our business is totally changed. So chatting to women, like I said, basically when I found out I was pregnant, I went and had coffee with a load of those ladies and from SWOPRA, and then also Rachel Willis Sorensen, who's an amazing performer, soprano, and has a family as well. So yeah,
I didn't realize she had a family.
Yeah, she has 3 children.
Oh, 3! Wow.
Children. Yeah, so she's doing a lot of plate spinning.
Wow, she's a good singer. She's something else. Yeah.
She's amazing, but she is very generous and encouraging, and it has always made me want to chat. And I've always been quite open and talked to lots of people about that kind of thing in the road. And as you know, it's there's no one path that's the same for everyone. We all make our way from music colleges, we all find our way forward. So it's always really good to have someone that you can chat to, both about your career aspirations, but also balancing that holistically with the whole of your life. What does that look like in terms of family? Does that include a spouse or a partner? Does that include maybe elderly parents that need to be considered, or a home that you don't you want to make where you want your home to be, which country, that kind of thing. There's just so many other parts of the puzzle. It was Joyce DiDonato in a masterclass I saw. She said, you've got to get your tent pegs in the ground, because when the wind blows, and shaped your identity as a performer. I'm a singer, I just sing. She's like, get the other tent pegs in the ground. There's got to be something anchoring you. So
she's a smart lady. Good advice.
Yeah, good advice.
Wow. Sam, pleasure.
Duncan, it was super. Thanks so much. I really, really love chatting, and yeah, great to catch up.
Yeah, with you too. And well, maybe we'll do another one in 5 years when we're both
that'd be super. Hopefully we can just catch up for a normal drink before that. I mean,
hey, that would be nice.
That'd be super.
That would be lovely. All right.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.